Hey everyone, Ryan Scott here. I'm the lead columnist for D3Hoops.com. And I realized the last videos I made about bracketing um, were several years old now, before we started using NPI. And so it's done a little bit different. And I figured it was time to do another video. So what you see in front of you is the spreadsheet I used to do my mock bracketing. On the left, you will see in snake fashion the projected field that comes from Scott Peterson of D3 Stat Lab. You can check out his stuff on that website. He covers NPI and all sorts of data for women's basketball across D3. Um, and so what you'll see there is all of the top seeds, starting with Oshkosh going down, and then moving over in snake fashion. Carroll is 17, going up to Christopher Newport at 32, and likewise all the way through. And what that shows you is the 1 through 64 field. Now that we have NPI, we know exactly where the teams rank. Again, this is a projection of what he thinks based on everything, and that's through today, the 23rd of February, at the start of what is Conference Championship Week. I know some of them have started already, which will impact some of them here if there have been some upsets. Um, they'll be reflected in here and what's projected based on who's left in the tournament and all that good stuff. But what it would tell you is if it was a 1 to 64 tournament, these are what the pods would be. Oshkosh would be playing Asbury. The winner would get Christopher Newport and Linfield. With Division III, we have some limitations that keep us from doing that. The biggest one is the geographic limitation. If a team is 500 miles away from the site of competition or more, the NCAA pays for a flight. And because Division III doesn't have a lot of money, we want to minimize the flights as much as possible. We want to keep as few flights as possible. So we move teams around based on geography. The other thing is conference opponents may not play in the first round. So you're going to have to move in that case. And we try as much as possible to keep them from playing in the second round. That's not a requirement, but we definitely try that as much as possible. They also try to avoid matchups from the regular season. I try to avoid that a little bit less because I would prefer to keep seeding over some of those things. We do know from the women's basketball committee that they do try to prioritize seeding as much as possible. Um, and so what you see loaded here over on the right side are the top 16 teams. And this is in a sort of bracket format. It doesn't look quite like a bracket like this, but I'm going to hopefully explain that to you so you can see that. Um, the 1, 4, 2, and 3 over on the right side here talks about the overall seeds. So this across the top, Oshkosh, NYU, Washington Lee, Johns Hopkins would be the overall ones in the quadrants. And each of the quadrants would go down the column, right? So if we made it to a Sweet 16 and all the seeds held, Oshkosh would play Smith. That would be the 116 game. NYU would play WashU. That'd be the 215 game. Washington and Lee with Baldwin Wallace, etc. And so then you have the 2 3s down at the bottom. And so we try to have it so each of your bracket quadrants is one of the columns. And then also within each one, you have a 1, 4, 2, 3. So we try to match it up the way that they would be in the first weekend pod. So generally, the 4 seeds are in this column G over here, the lower seeds, and they'll go into the 4 spots. We also have the overall seeds here, so you can see where the ideal bracket would match up. That is more just for my reference as I'm working through this. We can't obviously stick to that very strongly, but it helps me try to remember where everybody is supposed to be. As you'll see, we move things around quite a bit when we get there. So we're going to try to put this together. I'm coming to this fresh, so I don't know if there's any geographical challenges or things that I'm going to have to work through. Could make it problematic, but we're going to try to do our best to put a bracket together so you can see how this works. And the way that we have to start, well, first thing, I already did a men's mock bracket. And men and women cannot host at the same time. So we need to make sure that we don't have any overlaps. And so the one that is frustrating. I had to give John Carroll a hosting situation in order to make the geography work for men. And so what we have here is this John Carroll team will not be able to host in the first round based on these mock brackets that I've done. Now, hopefully that will not happen in the real situation. You know, if the men's committee goes to the women and say, hey, we really need another host in Ohio or in the middle of the country somewhere, they're going to maybe say, hey, that team is in line to host. Can you find somebody else to fit into that spot? I'm not sure it would work given the situation that we have for the men. So they may come back and say, no, we really need John Carroll to host. And so the women are not going to be able to. So I've unbolded John Carroll because they are not going to be able to host that first weekend pod based on what we have. I think everything else, there are no overlaps. Emory's not hosting. We don't have Chicago in a hosting position. Stevens Point is the WIAC one. So I think we're in a spot that is the only one that we're going to have to think about. So they're probably going to try to move that to the 2 seed. We'll have to figure that out when we get down there. And then it comes to geography. None of these hosts are extreme outliers except for Concordia Moorhead, which is up just across the border from Fargo, North Dakota. It is very far away from everything. There are very few of these 2 seeds that could drive there. Even I think River Falls could probably get there. Gustavus is in the same conference, so we want to try to avoid that. I'm not even sure Wisconsin Lutheran could get up there. One of the ways we find out is Scott Peterson also has provided us with a distance calculator. The NCAA has a distance calculator that they use to determine the 500 miles, and that is the law, no matter what. It used to be public. We started asking too many questions about how it was formatted and why some of the distances didn't match the shortest distance. And there may be perfectly valid reasons for that. They just were unwilling to give them to us, and so they hid it behind a password. And so now we do not have access to it, but Scott has worked hard to try and kind of duplicate this with the NCAA database. And so you can look at something like Wisconsin Lutheran, even though they're only 1 state over, they're still 564 miles away. And so we could not send them up there. So we want to try and find a team that can go there that's pretty close to the 22 seed. And would you know it, the 22 seed is UW La Crosse. And they are, I know already because I've done a whole bunch of these mock brackets, but we'll put this in just to prove it. UW La Crosse is within 500 miles of Concordia Moorhead, and it matches up perfectly. So that is wonderful. The next thing we'll have to look at is there a team somewhere near 43 that can also get there? One of the benefits here is we've got this Hardin-Simmons flight that is probably going to have to happen from Texas, so we can probably work them in there. We're not going to spend too much time thinking about that at the moment. We'll try and fill these in as we get there because somebody like Bethany Lutheran can certainly get up there, or maybe Trinity as they're flying. One of the questions we would have when it comes to geography is not just the host, but is there another pod that's not one of the top 16 that should host? And often this is Texas. So what we have here is we have Hardin-Simmons and Trinity that are both within a drive of each other. If we had a third Texas team, they would probably try to force a pod down there because these are pretty low-ranked teams, and you're going to have to fly 2 in there anyway. They might try to avoid that. The problem we're running into this year with women's basketball is you have Linfield, who is up in Oregon, who is going to have to fly no matter where they go. We've got Colorado College, who is going to have to fly no matter where they go. And we have Redlands, who is going to have to fly no matter where they go. And so if we fly the Texas teams out, that is 5 teams flying around in the first weekend, which is a high number. They really want to keep that as low as possible. We've got 3 teams that are going to have to fly no matter what. So 3 is our minimum number of flights that we are going to need. And the question is whether we can put a half decent pod together with Trinity and Hardin-Simmons and maybe a couple of other teams flying in. It's going to be really hard to do. You can maybe make Linfield into a 2 seed to go down there. And I guess that would save a flight because they're already flying. And then you need to fly a 1 seed in from somewhere. And so there's a potential, if we had some geographic issues with Moorhead, they could fly into Texas and we could put a pod together like that. I think we may actually have to do that. With Linfield getting all the way up to the 33 spot, that's going to cause a little bit of issues. They can certainly be justified moving on to a 32 spot. The problem is when we get into a bracket like this, the teams that you would take the host away from really should be playing a top ranked team and not one all the way down here. And so you might argue as a committee that because Smith is losing the opportunity to host, giving them an easier potential second round game might be worth it, right? And it's very hard to predict what the committees are going to do in this situation. And so I am going to try to bracket this, assuming we can fly 5 teams. We might get to the point where we have to come back and create a Texas pod around probably Smith. If there are other geographic issues or things that we're running into, we're going to want to be able to go back and do that. And so I want to make sure I'm crossing off the teams that I have already put in. La Crosse is on there, so we want to make sure that that works. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we have all of our Midwest teams accounted for. So we have 1 in Oshkosh. We have got 2 in Whitewater, 3 in Moorhead, although we've already got that picks, 4 in Platteville, and then 5 in WashU, who are all the way out in the Midwest. We also have the benefit of having Ohio Wesleyan and Denison and Hope, who are in the middle of the country, which will really help us with geography. So we should be able to make this all work. Looking down this list of 2 seeds, we've got Carroll out west, that's 1. Chicago is 2. Illinois Wesleyan is 3. Ripon is 4. La Crosse is 5. Bethel is 6. Wisconsin Lutheran is 7. Gustavus is 8. And River Falls is 9. We need 9 hosts who can get some of these Midwest teams to them. So Oshkosh is 1 that we can probably get them to. Ohio Wesleyan is 2. Baldwin Wallace is 3. WashU is 4. The alternative for John Carroll can be 5. Denison will be 6. Platteville could be 7. Moorhead would be 8. Whitewater's 9. And we've even got Hope. So we probably have 10 potential hosts that we can get some of these teams to. And so in this instance, we probably can make this work out okay. So we want to start adding these teams in and seeing if we can do anything with it. Smith should be lined up for Carroll. Obviously, Smith is in Massachusetts. They're not going to be able to take any of these first few teams. And so Bates is the highest ranked team that we can send there. So we're going to try to do that. WashU can get Carroll. Carroll can get to WashU very easily. Chicago can get to Baldwin Wallace. We're pretty sure. We're just going to double check this. I'm relatively sure. I've done a lot of these. Yeah, that's a super easy one. But starting at the beginning, I want to show you how that all works to make sure that the distances work. We could get Illinois Wesleyan to Ohio Wesleyan. That's not a problem. Ripon is up in Wisconsin, so not a problem getting to Platteville. All right, so we're filling all of these in now. We've got all of those through. Portland is in the east, so we'll wait on that one. Trine is in the middle of the country. We're going to wait as well. Bethel should be able to get to Whitewater just fine, but we'll check that because we're going to be more safe than sorry here at the beginning. Whoa, where did I miss Bethel? All right, let's see if we can type. Bethel, there we are. And they are going to UW Whitewater, which should be perfectly fine. I don't have any doubts, but just want to double check to make sure that we've got all those distances correct. So Bethel can fit in here just fine. And then we've got Wisconsin Lutheran, who is the next one up. They're the 28. So we could probably send them to Denison. The problem we're going to run into is the lowest ranked Midwest team is River Falls, and we do not want to send a WIAC to a WIAC. So we want to find a place that River Falls can go, and that might be Hope. I'm not sure River Falls can get to Denison. They're pretty far up there. We might need to change this around a little bit just to make this work. So we're going to go UW River Falls. I doubt they can get to Denison. Yeah, that is way too far away. So we are going to have to send them to someplace quite a bit closer, but we can't send them to Platteville or Whitewater or Oshkosh. And they're all the way down. Do we need to move them to a 3 seed? Which we might have to do in order to get them on a proper line. This is where having so many WIACs comes in, and I am scanning this to see if we have any places that we can get them to. I wonder if maybe this is a place that we can use a middle team. So who is around 25? I wonder if River Falls can get to Trine. Or maybe even Bethel. John Carroll can't get all the way up there, but could River Falls get to Trine? Let's see what we have here. River Falls can't even get to Trine, so that throws us off there as well. Who is around 25? Bethel would also be there, but John Carroll is not going to be able to get to Bethel. La Crosse isn't going to be a matchup we can do. I wonder if they should be able to get to Ripon. Can John Carroll get to Ripon? Could we have Ripon hosting? That could be an interesting way to solve this dilemma. We can't. All right, so we are really running out of places to put River Falls at this point. This is one of those details that just isn't any fun. So you would want them somewhere along these lines that we can't get them to. And we don't want to, so we may have to send them to another WIAC school. It's just what we're going to have to do, I think. As the fifth WIAC team, I suspect we're just going to have to send River Falls to Oshkosh. Because that's how the bracket is going to work out. And although it's right next to Gustavus, so where would we send Gustavus? They probably can't get to anybody either. Man, this is a really difficult part of this bracket. We may have to use Chicago as the alternative host for John Carroll, but they can't because their men are hosting. So we can't even put that in there. So I wonder if we use Illinois Wesleyan. They're in the 19 spot. We would have to drop them down in the rankings, which would give them a slightly harder game, but they would get it at home. That would be a spot I believe John Carroll can get to, and that would also give us a lot of flexibility. Wait, did we have their men hosting? I bet we did have their men hosting, didn't we? So we can't use that one either. We did have their men hosting, so we've also lost that potential midpoint. So now we'd be all the way back to Carroll. Their men are definitely not hosting. Can John Carroll get to Carroll? I think that's too far. No, John Carroll to Carroll is the same distance as Illinois Wesleyan. That seems very strange to me, but the distance says it can work, so we're going to make it work. We are going to put Carroll as the host here. It's going to make us change some things around. We can't send Chicago to Wash U, so we will probably have to send Illinois Wesleyan down there. That's a rematch we don't like, but what is our other option? We could send Ripon there. Ripon can get to Wash U. I think Ripon's in southern Wisconsin, right? So that should work. Yeah. Um, Illinois Wesleyan and Wash U play all the time, and so it's kind of less exciting to have this matchup. Um, although that keeps the seeding, and arguably the committee cares a lot more about seeding than anything else. We may not have teams that can get all the way to Ohio Wesleyan, though. If Ripon can't go there, we might have to send them to Wash U anyway, just to. You can see that there's lots of checking here when we're trying to make the geography work. They can get to Ohio Wesleyan, so if we want to try and keep seeding, we can send Ripon to Ohio Wesleyan. We want to avoid putting La Crosse here, so that would put Bethel here, and then Gustavus would go here. We just want to double check. I mean, there's really no place around the River Falls ranking that would really make sense for them to go. And being the fifth WIAC team, you kind of have to send them to another WIAC. It is less than ideal. It is not the way the committee wants anything to go. The only question would be whether they can get to Hope. And I just don't think that's true either. I think that's too far. River Falls is pretty far away. I guess the question would be whether La Crosse could go somewhere else. But then we would really be messing up our seeding, right? If we sent River Falls to Moorhead, that would be moving almost 10 spots, 9 spots to make the geography work. And then you'd still have another WIAC team. I mean, we could really bend the brackets and bend the seeding in order to keep the WIACs away from each other. And I just don't know how much the committee is going to be willing to do that. But let's do it for now because we're doing a mock bracket and we want to see how this all works out. So we could send La Crosse there and we could send River Falls here. We're going to run out of somebody to send to Oshkosh though, aren't we? That could be interesting. So just looking at the seeding, Carroll is the top one. We're giving them an alternative host. Chicago, we don't want to match up with WashU because that's potential conference opponents in the second round. So we've switched Chicago and Illinois Wesleyan. We are sending Ripon to Ohio Wesleyan. We are sending Bethel to Platteville, River Falls to Moorhead, Gustavus to Whitewater, La Crosse to Hope. And then we do still need a team that's sort of at the end here that we could send to Oshkosh. That should be Gustavus, right? That should be the team we send here by the seeding, which means we need another team there that is not a WIAC team, which is probably Ripon. But then I don't think La Crosse can get to Ohio Wesleyan, and we're messed up again. Yeah, La Crosse definitely can't get there. Ripon could go to Whitewater, correct? Yeah, and that would not be problematic. And that would allow us to put Trine here. So Trine seating would be moved 4 spots in order to make that work. River Falls is getting an advantageous position, but it allows us to keep Moorhead hosting, which I'm sure, they're going to have to play a WIAC team one way or another. And I guess they're not going to be upset about playing a lower ranked one instead of a higher ranked one. And so I think in order to keep, and this is where the committee has continually told us that they're not going to prioritize hosting over seeding. And so I suspect that what I'm doing here is maybe not going to be an accurate prediction of what the committee is doing, but it does work within the confines of what we're doing. It doesn't mess up our seeding too much. So we want to make sure we have now, because I've been moving around so much, all the teams on. We have River Falls on. We have Gustavus on. We have Wisconsin Lutheran somewhere. We do not have Wisconsin Lutheran anywhere. Okay. So that's one we still need to find a spot for. Interesting. But we've got Bethel and Trine on here now. So I wonder if Wisconsin Lutheran is lower ranked than Trine, so they wouldn't go there. Trine is, or Wisconsin Lutheran's about here. Can they get to Denison? That'll be our only question. I think they probably can. Wisconsin Lutheran, I believe, should be able to get to Denison is in the middle of Ohio, so that should be doable. So we will put Wisconsin Lutheran here, which is pretty close to their seating. And that leaves everybody else there. Okay. So that was a bit of a handful, but you can see where the problems come in. Are there any? So Southern Maine is one that we're going to have to deal with. They're at 29. They're not going to be able to get to Washington Lee, and I bet they can't even get to Johns Hopkins. Yeah, so we're probably going to have to send them to NYU just for seating, even though that is the spot that CNU would belong. And we'll put CNU there because they can definitely get to Washington and Lee. That would leave us with New Paltz, who can definitely get to Johns Hopkins. That would put William Patterson at Scranton, which is very possible. Cortland cannot. Oh, Cortland can probably get to Bowdoin, right? Shouldn't be too hard. Bowdoin is pretty far up there, but yeah, Cortland can get there. So we are continuing to put our seating in as close as we can after all of the geographic mess that we had to do. So we have all of our 2 seeds on lines to places they can drive without having any of the WIACs meeting each other in either the first or second round. Again, committees may try to prioritize that. They may try to prioritize keeping the seating closer together, maybe having some of those WIACs playing in the second round potentially. But in this case, the geography all matches up, which is fantastic. Again, we're doing this all with the presumption that they're not going to try to minimize flights by doing a Texas pod. If they do a Texas pod, again, we would have 4 flights, right? Because Linfield, Colorado College, and Redlands have to fly no matter what. You would fly one of them into that Texas pod along with a top seed. So you'd end up with 4 flights. Flying the Texas teams out as 5 flights, it's 1 flight difference, which usually the NCAA is willing to put up with. So we are going to work on this, having all those flights out. So we're going to look down and see, do we have Western? So Emory is our next one that we're going to have to worry about for geography, because I believe Washington and Lee is the only host that Emory can drive to. So we are going to have to put Emory in this pod right off the bat. They're not going to have any other place they can go. Do we have any other like really unique ones? Doesn't look like at this point, and we don't have any. Asbury's in the middle of the country. Brevard is pretty far south, but we should be able to make that work in a few places. Right. Okay. So then we can start to put them in terms of our middle of the country. We don't have that very many out west. So Wartburg is pretty far out. So the 47 seed would line them up with WashU, which Wartburg can definitely get to. So we will line Wartburg up there. That's their actual seating location. So we can make that work. The one thing we may run into, Transylvania can get to WashU. We're going to have to try and figure out, with enough flights, which we do have, Linfield going to Oshkosh, they're flying no matter what, so we can make that work. Susquehanna can certainly get to NYU. I'm just going to try to go down the list and make this work. We've already got Emory in here. Messiah can get to Johns Hopkins. This would be flying Colorado College to Scranton, which we might have to save. So I'm going to put, well, let's put it in for now, and we'll see if we have to fix these later. That would put Shenandoah at Denison playing Wisconsin Lutheran, which would be very cool that they can both get there, right? Shenandoah and Wisconsin Lutheran is not a first round matchup you're hardly ever going to see. But because they're both within 500 miles of Denison, we can make that work, which would be pretty cool. I think Gettysburg can get to Bowdoin, but we really have to check that because Bowdoin is pretty far up there and they cannot do it. So we are going to need a team. Randolph-Macon won't be able to do it. Otterbein won't be able to do it. Shenandoah won't be able to do it. We'd be all the way down to Hardin-Simmons in the 42 spot, or Colorado College in the 36. So 42 is actually closer. So we can fly. Well, we may need Hardin-Simmons in the middle of the country. Huh. So this is an interesting bug that we've got going on here. In terms of Colorado College is in the 37 spot. That's off. Gettysburg will also not be able to get to Carroll. Well, let's start going backwards then. Brooklyn definitely can get to Smith. So let's make sure we get these New England ones in. Johnson and Wales. Gosh, we'll have to go to Bowdoin because that's so far up in New England. Nobody else. They're not going to be able to go anywhere else. It would be either, NYU or Bowdoin. They could maybe go to Johns Hopkins, but again, that's not going to help us with our seating very much. This is why we make the look. This is why we take the look at this. You can see the geography in this tournament is going to be really skewed because of all the WIAC teams that are involved. So, coming from this way, Washington and Jefferson should be here, which they can definitely get to Baldwin Wallace. So we'll try to put that in. Transylvania can get to Ohio Wesleyan without any issues. Carnegie Mellon will not be able to get to Platteville or Moorhead, or, well, they might be able to get to Whitewater. Whitewater is pretty far south. I doubt they can do it, but we want to check just because and they're not that close. Okay. So that would be looking at probably having to send them to Hope. In order to make that work. Hardin-Simmons can move around plenty, so they would be going to Platteville as a flight. Otterbein would be up next. Definitely can't get to Moorhead, but they can get to Whitewater. I believe we've checked that before, but we'll double check that again just to make sure. Yeah, they're within plenty of distance. So that pulls Hardin Simmons off the board. It pulls Otterbein off the board. Randolph Macon is also, is that the last one? No, we need a team that can get up here, which will have to be Colorado College, right? But Colorado College is higher ranked than Hardin Simmons, which would work in this location. So we'd be looking at Colorado College, and then we'll have to replace them here. Sorry that I'm talking through this at a way that maybe is not the best explainer. The geography in the women's tournament, as you can see, is tricky. I do not envy any of these teams, any of these committee members trying to figure this out. We do have Shenandoah in already. I've missed a couple of these. We have Susquehanna and Messiah in already. So we're down to Gettysburg and Randolph Macon as our two. And neither of them is going to be able to get out to Harrell. So we're going to have to move some folks around again. So I suspect we're going to have to put Transylvania here because I think Transylvania can get to Carroll. They are in the middle of the country, well, the D3 country, in a way that is just super helpful when it comes to bracketing. So we are going to put Transylvania on this line, which helps us out of a huge jam. And that allows us to get, so the higher of those seeds is Gettysburg, who we can get to Scranton, no problem. And I think Randolph Macon can get to Ohio Wesleyan, but we will have to double check that because Ohio Wesleyan is pretty far west. Yeah, that one doesn't work. So we'll have to do one more little swap. So Shenandoah, well, Denison is also pretty far out there. They might not be able to make that one either. Nope, they can make Denison. And Shenandoah, I know can make Ohio Wesleyan, but we're just going to double check. So yeah, so we'll have to make this flop for geographic purposes. But then we're going to want to go back and look because of all the movements that we've done. We may have gotten off a little bit. So we've got Linfield, Susquehanna, Emory. We had to move. We know that's off. Messiah is next. Colorado College. We had to put all the way up to Moorhead, which is just an inevitability of the geography. So we're going to have to see where potentially, because Transylvania can't get up there, Carnegie Mellon can't get up there, Otterbein can't get up there. So that really is our higher seed that we can get to Moorhead. So then we have Shenandoah next, which should be here. Can Gettysburg get to Ohio Wesleyan? Because they are the higher. Shenandoah is the higher seed, so they deserve to be on this line going to Scranton if possible. So can Gettysburg get out there? They can. So we can swap these two just to keep the seedings proper. Shenandoah can definitely get to Scranton. I'm not too worried about that. So Gettysburg is the next one. And we know Randolph Macon can't get to Ohio Wesleyan, which is why we had to put them here. And we know they can't get to Bowdoin and they can't get to Carroll. So we had to move Randolph Macon up here. So we're Gettysburg. Gettysburg is ahead of Carnegie Mellon. I don't think Gettysburg can get to Hope. We're just going to double check these to make sure. Yeah, Gettysburg can't get to Hope. So they can't go there, and they definitely can't go on any of these. So that really is the highest spot that we can put Gettysburg. We're underseeding them, which means they've got a tougher first round opponent, but that's just going to be how it is. And then we go back to looking at this Randolph-Macon. We had to move Johnson and Wales all the way up here. We had to move Transylvania up for geographic reasons. So the next one is Otterbein versus Carnegie Mellon. Otterbein can get to Whitewater. Carnegie Mellon definitely can't. So we had to flip those for geography. Colorado College had to be moved down. Hardin-Simmons is actually next on the list. And so flying them up there makes sense. Gettysburg, we already talked about. Washington and Jeff is next. And then Wartburg and then Brooklyn. So given our geographic challenges, we've got everybody seated in the proper positions in the third spot. Now, though, we're going to have to see if we have enough of our Western Midwest teams in order to actually fill out the rest of this bracket, because we have to get teams to Moorhead and Platteville and Oshkosh. And we'll have to see if we can make that happen. We do have Redlands and Trinity, which will help us. Asbury, I'm assuming, cannot get to Oshkosh, but they might be able to get to Whitewater, which could help us. Principia is out there. I guess we'll double check, but I'm pretty sure Principia can get to Oshkosh. It might be close, but they should be able to do that. Yeah, it is over 400 miles, but it's not over 500 miles. So we will put Principia. All right. In there. Asbury cannot get, well, they might be able to get to NYU, but Bridgewater State definitely can. I don't think there's any way Asbury can get to NYU. They're in Kentucky. I don't think they can go to the Northeast at all, which is fine, but I'm just going to double check how exactly. Yeah, 700 miles. Man, usually I'm pretty good with geography, folks. That was not a great one. The question, though, is Bridgewater can't get to Washington Lee, but they may be able to get to Johns Hopkins because Maine Maritime is pretty far up there, and we are going to have to check. Can not Bridgewater, Virginia, Bridgewater State get to Johns Hopkins? They can get there, and that would allow Maine Maritime to get to NYU, right? Because Maine Maritime is also another one of these that's very far north, see, 456. We may even up having to put them all the way at Bowdoin, which is not ideal, actually, now that I'm looking at it. Well, Emmanuel can get up there, and they're pretty close, so that should work fine. So we're doing Bridgewater State now here, and Maine Maritime here. All right, so Bethany Lutheran probably needs to go to Moorhead, right? That's the place for them. They can definitely get to Moorhead. They're up there in Minnesota. That will work. Trinity, we probably need to fly someplace up in that vicinity, so we're going to wait. St. Mary's now is the lowest ranked team that can get to Washington and Lee. We want to make sure we don't forget that. So we put them in there. Brevard. Ooh. We may have gotten too far away from Brevard. I'm not sure they can get. Well, let's see if they can get to Denison. That'll be our. Brevard is in Western North Carolina, so there's a chance they can get to Denison. They can get to Denison. That is really helpful for us geographically. We know we need to send Emmanuel up to Bowdoin. That's a New England team going to New England. Barron and Geneseo and Merchant Marine are all next. Nobody's too far to the northeast. We still haven't assigned Asbury anywhere. So I suppose we could put Asbury here and move St. Mary's down there. And that I forgot all about Asbury. I didn't know if we were going to need them in the middle of the country. And we still might. Barron's also in the middle. Well, let's check first to see. I'm sure they can get to Washington and Lee, right? That's really not that far. Yeah. By seeding, that's probably what we need to do. So if we put Asbury there, we put St. Mary's of Maryland at Scranton. And all of this is working so far. So we're up to Behrend, who I don't think can get all the way to Carroll. Oh, it's Penn State Behrend. And we need them to get all the way to Carroll, which they cannot do. But they should be able to get to Hope, I think. Yeah. Which is actually perfect for us. They're not flying there, though. Geneseo's not going to be able to get out there. We are probably going to have to put Trinity here, because there's nobody else who's going to be able to get out there. So we are flying Trinity, Texas to Carroll to play John Carroll. And that is pretty close to where our seed needs to be. Geneseo is not going to be able to get to any of these. This is where we're going to run into trouble, folks. Because we need to get somebody to Platteville and Wash U. And we don't have anybody to send out there. We can send Redlands to Whitewater, and then we're out of teams that can make it that far. And I am not sure what to do with this. DeSales can get to Smith, that's for sure. Immaculata can get to Baldwin Wallace. Rochester Tech, I think, should be able to get to Ohio Wesleyan. We'll put that in just to be sure. So those all work. And then we are stuck with Geneseo, Merchant Marine. And we have extra flights that we do not know how to fix. We've already given Carroll another host out there. The question now becomes, at the very end of our bracket, do we have to take Smith's hosting spot away? In order to make our geography work, which would basically mean starting this whole process over again and figuring all this puzzle out. Or we go up to 7 flights, which is definitely an impossibility. We have to see if there's anybody back here that we can possibly get out that far, and there really isn't. And so I'm not even sure what the committee does at this point. They're really going to have to start over. And the problem then is putting another Western team out there, and it can't be Chicago, right? Because their men are hosting, and it can't be Illinois Wesleyan because their men are hosting. We'd be looking at potentially Ripon if they put in to host, or all the way down to La Crosse as an extra Midwest. Well, we don't want more Midwest spots, right? We've got these Eastern ones. Yeah, I mean, will we be going all the way down to Trine to try and make this work? And will we have to take Wash U's hosting spot away? So then do we host the John Carroll pod at Wash U? Can they get that far? They can't. The problem solving here is going to be real difficult. Can any of these? So maybe none of those are even close. We could put Trinity in here and do this. Yeah, we're going to have to find the alternative host there. I think that's our solution. We put Trinity, Texas down here for flying both Texas teams to Platteville. And can Geneseo get to Transylvania? Oh, is it SUNY Geneseo? It is. They can't. Can any of our... Barron has to go to Hope because nobody else can get that far. Brevard could get to Transylvania if Geneseo can get to Denison, but I'm not sure that's going to work. Geneseo can get to Denison. I'm assuming Brevard can easily get to Transylvania. We're solving geographic problems on the fly here, folks. So what we would end up doing is putting Brevard here, and instead of doing the alternative host at Carroll, we do the alternative host at Transylvania because Geneseo can get in here. That still leaves us with the problem of WashU. But what I do here is solve geographic problems. That is my strength, and that is what we're going to attempt to do. Do we have anybody in this area that we can move out there? Can we alternatively host at Illinois Wesleyan? If we can bring someone from the middle of the country in. I mean, that doesn't get us very far east, but it might get us close enough. Like, who would be in here? Washington and Jefferson, I don't think can get to Illinois Wesleyan, but that would be a little bit closer. Let's check it out. Oh, 503, man. That would be really helpful. We'd have to move them down to a 4 to make this all work. This would be a really difficult thing, but they're not that far away from Wartburg. So we could put Wartburg in the 4 and Washington and Jefferson there, but that doesn't actually work because they can't get close enough. But if we can get somebody else, we've already got Transylvania doing double duty. And I assume Wash and Jeff can't get to Carroll. Carroll's already a higher seed. So we could send them there. Because Illinois Wesleyan can get to Transylvania. So if we put Carroll back up in this spot and we move Illinois Wesleyan down here, which is farther than they should go, but Chicago is next. Trine is the one that's there. We could put Illinois Wesleyan there where they belong. And we can now pop Trine in there because we're giving an alternative host that actually works. Why did I not figure this out in the first place? Brevard probably can't get all the way to Trine, so we still have to host it at Transylvania. That doesn't get us any closer to somebody here. Who can get farther out? Asbury. What if we put Brevard back here? Where can Asbury get to? Now we just start looking for where they can drive to. Can they drive to Illinois Wesleyan? They absolutely can. Okay. So we could put Illinois, no, we can't put Illinois Wesleyan as the alternative host because their men are hosting. This is where we're running into trouble, right? With these alternative hosts. That's why we had Carroll doing it in the first place. Um, Asbury could definitely get to Trine, right? And Trine at 25 is not all that far off from where they're supposed to be. So if we switch Asbury into the middle, we put Brevard back here. Asbury's going to get overseeded just simply because of their geography, is what it's looking like. Can they get all the way to Wash U? They can. All right. So we may end up just having to way overseed Asbury to make all this work. Because Merchant Marine can't get to Transylvania or Trine, but somebody could. So we're going to have to send Asbury out here, even though it's a way overseed. And that leaves us with a Merchant Marine team. It's not going to be able to get to Trine, but we can get somebody else there. I know we can. So we're going to be looking at Trine as our alternative host. And we need somebody on the 4 line up there. It's not going to be DeSales or Immaculata. Is it Geneseo? Sorry, SUNY Geneseo. Can they get to Trine? They can. So if we put Geneseo here, Merchant Marine can probably not get to Denison, I'm going to guess, but we're getting closer. Sorry that we're doing this didn't work out perfectly, and maybe I should have worked this out ahead of time and just explained it to you, but you are seeing the process by which we make this happen. Can Immaculata get to Denison? They can definitely get to Denison, and Merchant Marine should be able to get to Baldwin Wallace. Yeah. So we put Immaculata here, and we put Merchant Marine here, and we have all the puzzle pieces in place to make this happen. So we are going to have to go back and look at our seedings. I don't know who else. I mean, I guess I should double check that Brevard can't get out to Wash U, but I don't see any way that that's possible. Yeah. So this is presuming John Carroll hosts for the men, which is an alternative host that we need to make the men's bracket work. That puts Trine in the middle of everything. As a host, they certainly have a great facility. They'll be able to do it. We've got Principia pretty low, Bridgewater's pretty low, Maine Maritime. Brevard's dropped back a little farther than is ideal. And Brevard's not going to be able to get all the way up to Scranton, I don't think, to be able to switch those. But we do need to check just for seating. Yeah, they definitely can't get all the way up there. So we've got Brevard moved back. St. Mary's. Question about, yeah, Immaculata's not going to be able to get to Hope. They can't get to Trine. So is it Rochester Tech? Maybe. Because RIT is a lower seed than Immaculata, so we might be able to switch those. Can Rochester Tech get to Denison? Yes. Then we have to check Immaculata to Ohio Wesleyan. And those both work. So because of the seeding, we're going to want to switch these. Just to make sure that we've got that set. I know we're moving things around as much as possible, but we still want to try and maintain the seeds if we can. Barron gets to Hope. So Redlands versus Trinity. Trinity is actually the lower seed. So we should switch these. Trinity, Texas goes to Whitewater. Redlands goes to Platteville. In order to make those seeds work. Bethany Lutheran, we had to move all the way up to Moorhead just for geography. And that says Merchant Marine. That's not the correct word. Merchant Marine is ranked lower than DeSales, but we've got DeSales right where they're supposed to be. Okay, so this was a big pain, and I'm sorry that we had to work through this. I probably should have prepared a better ahead of time, but this bracket actually does make sense for the first round pods. And so now all we need to do here um, is match up the second weekend, which may be just as difficult, but they're certainly more willing to do flights for the second weekend. So can we keep all of these teams hosting? Again, we can't line up the twos. The ones and the twos have to stay apart as long as possible. So we can't move those, but we can move the threes to the fours and around as needed. Moorhead is actually too far from any of these places, believe it or not. I think Platteville may be the only host that Moorhead can drive to. I'm looking at all of these. Yeah, we'll have to check Platteville. Can Concordia, Moorhead drive to UW Platteville? They can. It's 497. Um, so there's a good chance that they would try to match these two teams up in this pod here, which will really mess our seedings up. And I know that's going to make everybody upset. But we're probably going to have to do it. The other question would be if we just fly Moorhead someplace else, right? Because we could put WashU and Whitewater over here. We could even leave Hope there. Oh no, because Hope can go to the middle of the country, so we're not going to be able to do that. So we'll have to move Whitewater over and WashU. So we'll start with that. Cutting Smith out. We'll move WashU over. They can get to Oshkosh without a flight. Asbury, if they did happen to come out of there, would have to fly. I guess the other thing is making sure I didn't match up any conference opponents any place that they couldn't. But I didn't think that was as much of an issue. Right, so we'll put Smith back here for now, which is probably where they're going to have to stay because of how far north they are. Trine. John Carroll can't drive to Oshkosh, but Trine should be able to. Yeah. So I'm not sure how many of those teams would be able to get up there, but we don't have somebody on this line who's better able to get there. So they may have to host this somewhere in between. If we put Whitewater over here, that's a possible second round host. Because I'm pretty sure John Carroll can get to Whitewater, right? We've already figured that out. Oh, what did I do here? I don't know what I just added in this. No, remove filter. There we go. We made this work. I am not an Excel expert, folks. So we put Whitewater in over here. Can John Carroll drive to Whitewater? I believe they can, because that's where we had on the men's side, I believe, UW Whitewater. They can't. So we would be looking at Whitewater as the potential host for the second weekend. Well, they would be an alternative. We'll leave it like this for now. But Whitewater, I guess we have to put it on there because if we do highest seeds, Whitewater would be the one. There's not really another way to do that well. Unless we replaced this and again we have to keep the ones and the twos apart from each other. So that's the way we would have to do it. Because yeah, the John Carroll bracket is as close as we can get to Oshkosh. And so potentially, yeah, Whitewater would end up hosting that. NYU, Smith, and Bowdoin all go together fine. That's probably where we'd have to put Moorhead because they're going to have to fly no matter where they go. Um, and fly into New York. It's expensive, but certainly easy to get there. All right, so Washington, Lee, and Hope are not capable of getting to the same place, but they could both go to Denison. Um, so yeah, this is where the second weekend seeding, we could have some of our top seeds just not being able to host, um, which would kind of be stinky. Although, man, Platteville certainly cannot get to Johns Hopkins. And I don't know that could Platteville get to Denison? So we might actually have to switch this around strictly for uh, yeah, they can't get to Denison. So we might be able to keep Oshkosh hosting if we put Platteville over here instead of Whitewater, because Whitewater can get to the middle of the country, and that would help us with uh, some of these other pods. So we will move Platteville all the way over here. That would put Oshkosh back in the hosting position, simply because John Carroll would likely have to fly. I mean, if Trine comes in, they can get up there, but um, that leaves us with Hope, Baldwin Wallace, Washington, and Lee can all get to Denison. Um, Jan Hope is ahead of Whitewater, right? So we might have to put this at Ohio Wesleyan. Yeah. So this is what we'd be looking at for the second weekend. Um, very much less than ideal. Um, oh, you would get your two top overall seeds who could host. If John Carroll got through, um, they would just have to fly up there. That would be our potential flight. Moorhead's a flight no matter what. Um, and then depending on who came out of where, we might have some extras. But this is a mess of a women's bracket. Sometimes it has worked out as we've done the mocks very well. Currently, right now, it's a difficult situation, and you've seen all the questions and the problems that come along with this. But we have finally gotten to a bracket that works geographically. We've got 5 flights the first weekend. We've got some hosts who shouldn't be hosting the second weekend. But I think we have managed to put all of that together. And then I guess we should go back to our men and make sure there's nobody hosting that weekend who would be set up for the women to host that weekend, which isn't true. Um, yeah, so there is the bracket that would be put together. It is not ideal, but it fits all of the criteria that we have. You got to see all of the possible problems that come through. You got to see me problem solving in real time. And I'm sorry this video is a little too long. But if you have questions, again, put them in the comments and I'll try to answer them as we can. This process is not easy. And the solution, as everyone will tell you, is more money. I just don't know where that's going to come from. So thanks for watching, and looking forward to another great week.